The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Lab Manager Academy webinars, the brainchild of Lab Manager magazine. My name is Kaylee Thomas, and while I am usually behind the scenes on all of these webinars, today I am sitting in for your regular host, Jessica. Whether you've been with us before or this is your first time, this webinar series promises to bring you the most up-to-date information for your lab. I'm excited about today's webinar, How to Motivate Employees in Today's Lab. Before I introduce our presenter, please know that he welcomes your questions throughout the presentation. Just type your query in the question box, and we will try to get to it during our short time together. If we do not get to your question, the presenter has agreed to reply to you directly as soon as he can after the webinar. Also, all webinars are archived on the Lab Manager magazine website about 1 week after we complete them and can be viewed at any time. This specific webinar will be found at labmanager.com/motivation. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our sponsor. Which one of the slides there? Perfect. Unity Lab Services, part of Thermo Fisher Scientific, will now be sponsoring the Lab Manager Academy webinar series. Unity Lab Services provides a single source for integrated lab service, support, and supply management. Their customized service offerings and world-class service experts have the flexibility and experience to uniquely address your business needs. So let's get on with the reason you are here. Al Walker has been sharing his thoughts, ideas, and insights with audiences from around the world for over 30 years. In addition to his training and consulting, Al's clients began to ask him to speak at their corporate and associational gatherings because of his content and his sense of humor. Today, Al spends about 75% of his time as a keynote luncheon and banquet speaker, while he and his staff at Al Walker & Associates, Inc. provide hands-on, results-focused training in areas such as leadership, sales, time management, customer service, strategic planning, and other soft skill areas. In addition to his books, Thinking Big and Living Large, and his most recent, The Sheep Thief, Al has written articles on leadership, sales, customer service, personal development, and speaking that have appeared in professional publications throughout the world. Even after losing almost 200 pounds, which Al likes to call his evil twin, he is still known as a big man with a big message. Coming to us all the way from the heart of Southern Carolina, please help me give a warm welcome to Al Walker.
Thank you, and that slide I just put up is of the current me, who used to weigh about 455 pounds about 10 years ago, and it's been a long journey. We're not going to take up a lot of time discussing that right now. I'm excited about having a chance to do this today and share some of my thoughts with you. And no matter what kind of a lab you are in or a part of, I promise you this applies to you. I hope that all of you who are listening in see yourselves as being leaders, no matter what your title might be, because I'm convinced that anyone who influences someone else is a leader. And even if we're just influencing ourselves, we're doing some leading. So, so from that perspective, I hope all of this that we'll discuss today applies. We've got a lot to try to cover, and as was mentioned earlier, I'm sure you can have access back to these at some time, or email me, and I'll be happy to discuss any of this with you. I do want to ask you to write down any of the ahas you might have as we go through these questions or through these slides, and any questions you might have. There's a brief look at some of the things we're going to discuss about motivation, which is one of the most misused words, I think, in the English language and about any language. And it's kind of like I mentioned the other day, it's kind of like the word love. I love pizza and I love my wife. So it's kind of difficult to measure the difference between a lot of these words. Anyway, we're going to take a look at principles, what we really mean, what we should mean, what I think are three major concerns, a little bit about emotional intelligence. We're not going to get a lot into that, but then take a look at intrinsic and extrinsic stimuli, and then self-motivation, and a few other thoughts I'll share along the way. First thing is, and I'm not asking for any kind of response, verbally or otherwise, because everybody's muted, but do you agree or disagree with these statements? Number one, you cannot motivate anyone. When I ask that in a live audience, I get all kinds of responses. People say, yes, you can. Some say, no, you can't. And I get a few who nod their heads from side to side and make me wonder, what are they really thinking? Second one is all people are motivated, and 3, people do whatever they do for their reasons and not yours. Well, all 3 of those are true. You really can't motivate anybody. All we can do is create a climate in which people motivate themselves, and that's a real easy thing to say. The question is, how do we go about doing that? Second thing is, all people really are motivated. I don't care if they're frozen in place doing nothing. Something's causing that. And then the third one is, people do whatever they do for their reasons, not yours. Most of the time, I have trouble figuring out what those reasons are or why they do what they do. I've got a grandson who's now 13. Back when he was about 4, I came home one day from a trip when he and his mother were staying with us for a few days, and as soon as I came in the door, my wife came to me and said, well, your grandson, it's interesting how when he does something wrong, he's my grandson, not hers, but she said, your grandson kicked the door so hard that he slammed the doorknob into the sheetrock. And it had been several hours earlier that it happened, so I went back, and his name is Madison, and I said, Madison, we don't do that in our house. And I said, the next time you do that, what do you think Pop, which is what they call me, ought to do? And without hesitation, he looked at me, and I had never touched this child before, and he said, spanking? I said, okay, that's a deal. And we shook on it. I went back to my office, den area, and as about an hour later, I heard the door making all sorts of racket again, and I went down the hallway, and there he was, kicking the door. And I looked at him and smiled, and I stuck my hand out. He put his hand in mine and started screaming. And I don't know what caused him to want to test me, but I took him back and talked him a time or two, and he went to he thought I was stabbing him with a knife the way he was crying. And then when he got down to the heaving part, where he could finally make sense, I said, do you know why I did that? And he said, yeah, because of the door. I said, no, we made a deal, and I don't know what caused you to want to do that, but you did it, and whatever your motivation was, here are the results of that. So I don't know what people's reasons are a lot of times, but we'll try to take a look at what possibly might be some of those as we go through this. What do we really mean when we say we want people to be motivated? Well, we want people who can figure out things for themselves, people who are problem solvers, people who can see the big picture, whatever we're trying to accomplish, whatever our organization is trying to do, or whatever that job is trying to do. And we want people who think and not just are like robots. I know that so many times the things that we do repeatedly over and over and over, and it's challenging to sometimes stay motivated in that environment. We'll chat about that just a bit too. One of the great examples I remember years ago of difference between training and education, and I think that's what this kind of boils down to, is a friend of mine went into McDonald's in order to, back several years ago when all they had was milkshakes and hot apple pies, and ordered one of each. And when he got through with his order, the young lady behind the counter looked at him and said, would you like dessert with that? He didn't know how to respond. She'd been trained to say that. They told her every time somebody orders, ask if they want dessert. Well, she wasn't thinking, which means she wasn't educated to think about the bigger concept, just doing. And then what do we really mean when we say we want somebody who's motivated? Sometimes it may be we want imbeciles to perform like geniuses. What else? To change people who don't care into becoming people who do care about their job or about their work. We want to change people who are settling for mediocrity to those who want to achieve some degree of excellence. And I'm telling you, sometimes I know it's a challenge to take people who are just doing enough to get by, not enough to let them go, but not enough to do much else with them, to promote them or to put them in any kind of position of higher responsibility. And it's tough. I know that a lot of those people, it's kind of like a saying I heard years ago, it's kind of like teaching pigs to sing. If you're trying to motivate people that are not motivated, all it does is frustrate you and irritate the pig. It's also kind of like I've shared with some leaders before, but I think that sometimes in all these efforts to motivate somebody, basically what we're doing is giving mouth-to-mouth to a dead horse, and maybe we ought to do something else about that. The other one is that sometimes we want people who are consistently highly productive, people who are winners, who are go-getters, who are achievers, and it means a ton of different things when we say we want people to be motivated. What we probably should mean is that we want people who want to be successful. We want to help somebody be successful. We want to put somebody in the best possible situation that'll help them perform at a much higher level on a consistent basis. I don't know how many of you read Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, which is one of the classics now. been around for several years. But in it, I'm paraphrasing here, he talks about getting the right people on the bus and getting the right people in the seat on the bus. And to go back to that earlier slide, I'm not going to go back to it, but I said that we can't motivate people. What I mean by that is we can create an environment in which we enable people to be motivated. And one of the keys to helping that environment is having the right people in there to begin with, and to then help them be able to make sure they're in the right position. I think one of the secrets was said by Leona Helmsley, who was part of her husband owned the Helmsley chain of hotels, and she got in a little trouble years ago, but she still. And it was an ad I saw in the New Yorker that said, "We don't have to train our people to be nice; we hire nice people." I've always loved that thought, and kind of like we don't have to motivate our people; we have to hire motivated people, and all that's kind of my corollary on that, and that's all well and good. But here's some background for that. John Roulet, in a Forbes article he wrote at Forbes.com, you can go look that up. It was titled "Stop Motivating Your Employees," said that evolution has hardwired us with the desire to do hard quality work and to make sacrifices, because those characteristics are essential to the survival of our species. So here are the three concerns. One, hire motivated people. That's one of the concerns. The second is you've already got people, and that's the main reason a lot of you are probably here today is how do we keep people motivated? And some of you are also here because you want to know how to motivate unmotivated people. And I'm going to take a look at all three of those. How many times have you seen this ad that said, or something along these lines, wanted somebody who is self-motivated, or have used that term to say, we want somebody who is self-motivated? And what do people mean when they say that? Well, what they're after is we want people that we don't have to motivate ourselves, and we want you to come in already that way. Well, I honestly believe that when people come to a new job, when you came to your job you're doing right now, initially, weren't you motivated? Weren't you excited about, if nothing else, having a job and having a chance to, hopefully in your profession, as a professional, be able to do what you were trained to do or educated to do? And yet somewhere along the line, what causes people to lose that? So I think everybody is self-motivated. I'm not sure that's even the right thing to ever say in an ad or in an interview, because we all are to begin with. All motivation boils down to two things, just basically the stimuli. What is the stimuli for people? And the two big areas of motivation are, it's either intrinsic or internal motivation, that which we do to ourselves, which is what we do when we start a new job, which we do to ourselves when something good's about to happen. We're constantly, through our self-talk, sometimes we do demotivate ourselves by our negative self-talk, but intrinsic means what we do internally. Extrinsic are those things that happen to us outside to cause us to do something. And everything anybody has ever done to try to motivate people fits into one of two categories, and you might want to jot these down. One of them is fear, and the other is reward. That's not complicated, and there are a lot of rewards. Money certainly is one that people use, position, all sorts of recognitions, pats on the back, etc. And, of course, fear. And the question I asked is, fear motivate? Certainly. I don't know of many heroes or many people who have written books about doing something extremely courageous that at some point that didn't say, I really wasn't that courageous or that brave, I was just scared to death. And so fear motivates. And I remember a couple of decades ago, some of the better-known world psychologists and psychiatrists were actually saying fear didn't motivate. They went through a little phase of that, and wanting to be as open and as candid and as current with people I was working with as I possibly could be, I found myself actually saying fear doesn't motivate. Where in the back of my head, every time those words came out of my mouth, I'm thinking, worked on me. 'Cause I remember being a young man and young teenager, and my dad would leave the house in the summertime in the morning, and he'd say something like, the grass is getting kind of high around here. And, of course, I knew he meant he wanted me to cut the grass, and usually I would take the hint and go do that. Other times I would, and I'd get involved doing something else, and he'd let a day go by, maybe two, and then he'd come to me and get a little stronger. He'd say, son, you need to get this grass cut pretty soon. And I'd say, yes, sir, and certainly with that second hint would get to it. But invariably, every now and then it seemed like I'd have a neighbor's yard or 2 or 3 other neighbors' yards to cut for cash money. I wasn't thinking about food, shelter, and clothing I was getting from him. But anyway, I'd get busy doing that, or I'd go off doing something else and wouldn't get to it. And on a couple of occasions, I can see my dad right now, early in the morning after his patience had worn thin. My Al in Al Walker comes from Albert, and he would always call me Albert. He passed away several years ago, but he would holler for me in the house. He'd say, Albert, I need to talk to you right now. If I ever heard my dad say those words, Albert, I need to talk to or speak to you right now, in that tone of voice and with that voice inflection, I knew there was no danger of my going to him and him saying, oh, son, we love you, but thank you, it was just wonderful. I knew I was in trouble. And I can also see him now. He was a pretty big guy like I am, and he'd grab me by my shoulders and shake me just a little bit, and he'd say, are you listening to me? And I'd say, yes, sir. He'd say, when I get home tonight, if the grass isn't cut, I'm going to kill you. Now, I knew my daddy wouldn't do that, but I had enough fear of him taking me close to that that I went ahead and cut the grass, obviously, that day. However, I found that when I did it under duress or under that kind of pressure or where there was some fear involved, I tended to sabotage the situation. I would do things like not cut a spot just to see if he could find it, if I could get away with that. Or I remember one time I actually decided not to put oil in the lawnmower. It was a push mower, and decided to see what would happen if I didn't put oil in it. And it blew up about halfway through cutting the yard one day, and I pushed it in the back of the house. And I remember he came home and said, why'd you just cut half the grass? I said, well, the lawnmower blew up. And he said, well, let's take a look at it. We did, and as soon as he knelt down beside it and looked back up at me with that certain kind of look on his face, I knew I was in trouble. And he said, you didn't put any oil in this thing, did you? And I looked at him kind of dumbfounded and said, oil? I didn't know I was. And he said, yeah, you did. And so we got in his truck, I remember, and went to a hardware store and bought a brand new lawnmower. And on the way back home, he said, are you still cutting grass for so-and-so and so-and-so? And I said, yes. He said, for money? I said, yes, sir. He said, well, I want you to use this brand new lawnmower that we just bought, and I want you to bring me every dollar that they give you. Because you burn my lawnmower up, you're going to pay for this one. And I don't know if I actually did or not, but I did learn a great lesson that don't tear up the equipment. They'll tend to make you pay for it. Now, it's about 1:20 or so, and I was told I needed to stop here for just a minute. Kaylee, is that right? And
yeah, we have a few questions that have come in, Al.
Okay.
One of them is, how do we determine when to give up on an employee who does just not want to achieve more? They're just doing the bare minimum.
Well, the first question I'd have to ask is, have you been through a really solid coaching process with that person? Have you sat down with them and answered questions like, do they know what the problem is? Are they fully aware of the problem? Are they capable of improving? If they're not capable of improving, there's your answer. If they are capable of improving and of getting better, what has been done to help them do that? And if you've exhausted everything, it goes back to that thing about how some people are guilty of giving mouth-to-mouth to a dead horse. It's futile. And another little chain twist on that, I guess, I heard years ago that if the horse is dead, get off. So how much more are you willing to put into somebody who's not apparently ever going to be productive, and versus putting the effort into those who are productive and helping them all be better? So that's the quick answer for that.
Excellent. Okay. Another one is, are there any benefits to motivating with fear? In some cases, I've tried with rewards, but have only seen results with fear or threat.
Yeah. Well, and the problem is it's so short-term. It's great, again, in a military situation when we're trying to charge a hill, everybody's scared and going full force. I remember several scenes from movies like Braveheart and others where they're having at each other just wide open. But it has to be constantly done, and that wears on you so much. And it all depends on how much are you willing to do that. And I know that if you're in a lab that you've only got one person working for you and they're like that and you have to constantly do that, then if you're okay with it, stay with that program. But if you've got 2 or more in that lab with you, the others probably don't respond as well to fear as some do. And so we've got to figure out whatever that is for them. But after a while, you've got to ask yourself, how much do I want to have to go to war every day at work, as opposed to having the right kind of people around me? I know that's filled with a lot of challenges too, and I understand that. But that's my, again, quick answer for that.
Okay, and one more. How do you determine the motivation of a prospective employee? So is there some sort of question that would be good to ask in an interview, or?
Well, the key, I don't know if it's a right question. If you ask somebody, are you motivated? Well, sure. That's kind of like, are you a leader? Yeah. Well, what I'd want to know is, tell me some situations you've been in your previous work where you led a project or you accomplished that. I want to do something to get them to tell me about what they've done and how they did it, how long it took to do it, what were the results of that. And if we can ask those kinds of questions, I can begin to sense in a person's voice if they really are a self-motivated person, or if it's just some people want to be so professional that they want to sit back and be kind of stoic, and that tells me a lot too. Second thing is, past performance really is a pretty good indicator of future performance. And I know that it's difficult in this day and age when we go back and look for references. I just went through a hiring process a couple of months ago with a major head of an organization of about 1,500 to 2,000 people, and this person's doing great. And one of the things we were able to do was to go back and find some other folks that were outside of the references we were given. A lot of you already know that. But I would do everything I possibly could to find other people who the person had not expected me to contact, and see if we could, get some information that way as to what their level of self-motivation is. Again, everybody coming into a new job is probably going to be that way. How quick is it going to wear off?
Excellent, thanks. And we'll hand it back to you, Al, to continue the presentation.
Right. Since motivation's in our DNA, as was said earlier, it's instinctive for us. Who we should be hiring are professionals with three things that one of the great leaders I know that I work with, that's athletic director at a major university, he says there are three things he always looks for in the hiring process: intelligence, integrity, and work ethic. Those three things, and again, those are kind of like, how do we find out if somebody is motivated? And again, past performance is a good clue. But whatever we can do, and I don't mean just intelligence from a smarts, how much education do they have or how much experience do they have. I'm also talking about emotional intelligence. I don't know how many of you have read books like Primal Leadership, which is a great book, printed by HBS Press. That's Harvard Business School Press. It was written by three Harvard professors, Coleman, Boyces, and I think, and somebody named McGee. A lady, McGee, I don't remember her first name, but it's all about emotional intelligence. And they said that the four things for a leader to have a motivated group in the area of emotional intelligence is self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship management. Those are the four big things, and that kind of leads me to the thinking that it's interesting how many leaders and people in leadership positions, and by the way, just because you have a title doesn't mean you're a leader. You might just be a manager. Leaders are people who have followers, as we said earlier, and I think all of us are, even if just ourselves. But our true leader in a business, I've seen people who didn't have titles that were great leaders. But with so many of those, because they understand emotional intelligence, probably has a lot to do with that. I don't want to get too bogged down in that. How do we go about doing that? Finding people who are intelligent, people who have integrity, and people who have a strong work ethic. Well, we look at three areas. Again, their education and knowledge, their skill level, how much experience they have, and how good are they at doing what they do. We all know that knowledge by itself is useless if you can't use it. And then three, attitudes. And I'm telling you, I'm still of the ilk that I can teach somebody what to do and how to do it. What I can't do is change attitudes. I have tried in years gone by, maybe you have too, to change somebody's attitude, and it's just very difficult to do because so many people have still not learned that their behavior is what's causing them to have so many of the problems they have in life. It's because of their attitudes what's causing their behavior. And if you want to go all the way back to personalities, we don't have time for discussion on that either. That's a whole other workshop. But based on, just like emotional intelligence is a whole other workshop, but the basic for personality is formed in us by the time we're 5 or 6 years old. We all know that. And that basic personality has a natural behavioral style. And as we go through life, we learn that some of those things get us in trouble, so we don't behave that way. We adjust our behavior. And that has a lot to do with our attitudes. That's all interconnected, but those are the 3 things I look for. And so the question is, in order to meet all of these, the 3 areas of hiring the right people, motivating the ones we have, and fixing, so to speak, ones that are demotivated, what are the things that we need to be providing to all of those in order to raise the level of motivation? And there are these 4 things, and I want to talk briefly about each one of those. Number 1, I'll always ask, are the expectations clear? I personally do not like annual reviews. I think that to take somebody and sit them down 12 months after they've been working and talk about what they have or have not done, either one, over the past year is really folly. Needs to be done on a much more regular basis. Second thing is, do we have the adequate resources? Because if those aren't there, then people are going to be that's going to demotivate people if they can't do what they need to do. The third thing is respect. We do a lot of workshops and programs on behavioral styles and using DISC and Myers-Briggs, and a lot of you have been through every bit of that. And one of the things we do is break people up into 4 groups without even telling them about the 4 major behavioral areas, and ask them to come up, and we break them up. They don't know it, but they're all alike in each group, and ask them to come up with characteristics or things that are important to them. And they'll each really nail their behavioral style, and they'll all be different. But the one thing all 4 always have is the word respect. And then the fourth thing is trust. And I want to again chat about those. Let's talk about the clear expectations. Here's some questions to ask. I want to know, if I were coming to work with you, what's our purpose? What's our vision? What's our mission? You can go to a lot of websites, and those are printed on there with people. You can see theirs. You probably have some yourself. What's the goal of my particular job going to be? What are my expectations? What do you expect of me to do? What are the key result areas? In other words, what are the areas in which I need to spend time in the areas in which I need to get results? And then what are the performance standards? How am I going to be measured? And I know that I'll be successful in this particular area that I'm going to spend time in if the following conditions exist. Those are performance standards. And then not only how, but who's going to do the evaluating? How's that going to come about? So those are questions that the answers to which can clarify the directions and expectations of a person. Second thing is it deals with resources. Will we have what we need? It's a big question that people are asking all the time. Will we have what we need to be productive? And if not, why? And what are the plans? And if we have to deal with just as the current cliche goes, it is what it is. If it is what it is, then how can we make the most of what we do have? And if the expectations are so far beyond the resources we have, then that's obviously kind of crazy too. The third part of this, the respect piece, I guess that's the one characteristic, as I said, everybody on the planet yearns for. And heard years ago that it's kind of hard to respect others if you don't respect yourself. Of course, by the way, when you saw that word, if you launched into Aretha Franklin's RESPECT and you're with a group of people at a site somewhere, then you just told your age, because a lot of folks, the younger ones, may not be familiar with that, as familiar with that tune as you are. And the fourth thing I want to chat about briefly is, on this next slide, if I can get it to pop up, which I seem to have trouble doing right now, is the word trust. And I know it's there. It's just not cooperating. There we go. There's a formula I want to share with you if you want to jot this down about trust. I think explains it better than anything I've ever seen or heard. The T equals C plus I over R. Now, if you're big into math and mathematician, you might not agree with my formula here, but it does work for my intents and purposes. T is obviously trust. The C is credibility. Credibility being, do you always do what you say you're going to do? Are you a person I can count on? Are you someone that that when I come to you for counsel or for advice or for coaching or for anything else, I know that you're gonna be there for me as a leader. And then the I is intimacy, and by that I mean the kind of intimacy we have as we work with somebody, and the more we get to know them, they know a lot about you, or about me. I know a lot about them. We know a lot about what their likes and dislikes are, and what makes them tick, and what turns them off, hot buttons, all that sort of stuff. So the more that we know about a person, then the greater the level of intimacy. So if the credibility level is really high and the intimacy is high, we've known each other for a long time, then my risk in trusting you is very low. I've used the example before. A good buddy of mine wrote a book out, and he's out in Texas, and wrote a book where he took the Boy Scout oath and wrote an entire business book about that using the oath. And he talked about, had a list of professions and their credibility. And it was interesting. The studies that were done showed that people like nurses were really high on the credibility list, just without even knowing the person. If there was no intimacy, just from a credibility standpoint, nurses were high. Teachers had a high level of credibility. Pastors, not televangelists, but pastors had a high level of credibility. And so I've asked people before, who do you think might be on the other end of the spectrum, the low end of the list? And it always pops up. Attorneys, one. Then we have one of them's used car salespeople. Well, I have a couple of friends of mine who, over the years, I know one of them owns a great dealership here in my hometown, and he's a wonderful man and a great friend. And I know that the reputation they have is not good. But if you've ever bought a car from a used car salesperson, then their credibility was shot to begin with just by reputation and profession. And if you didn't know them, there was no intimacy, so your risk was really high in interacting with them and in entrusting them. So those are the basic criteria in a relationship. And those four things lead us to what I really think we ought to focus on if we're talking about motivation. Not on the what, but to focus on the why. I heard years ago that if you really want to interact well with people, is find out what they want and then show them how they can get it. I think another part of that, this I don't have on a slide, but you might want to add to this, is that the Latin term exemplum docet, D-O-C-E-T, the example teaches. How can you and I expect other people to be motivated if they don't see it in us? I know for a fact, one of the great management/leadership truths is that no one in an organization will rise above the people they see as leading that organization. In almost any area you can name, and one of those is motivation. If they see people dragging into work, if they see people not really giving 110%, then it'll reflect in what they do. I really believe that the challenge that we face in leadership is setting a pace for the people around us and letting them see how it should be done. I spoke down in Boca Raton, Florida back a few years ago for an organization. I had to go every week. I was doing some training with them, and I had to fly in on Sunday night and was there for 2 days every time I went down, Monday and Tuesday. And I remember the first time I went in on Sunday evening, I went into a hotel there. I'm always reluctant to name companies and hotels for a lot of reasons. But anyway, went into a hotel there in Boca, and when I pulled into the parking lot kind of late at night, I got in kind of late on a Sunday night, about 11 o'clock, and a gentleman was standing there holding the door. And as I went in, there were maybe 1 or 2 people in the lobby, but not hardly anybody there. But there were 2 ladies behind the registration desk, and they just were beaming, and they saw me come in, and they said, "Are you by chance Mr. Walker?" And how they guessed that, I guess I was the last one on their list. Maybe they didn't have many people staying there. That part doesn't matter. But that's what they asked. And I said, "Sure." And they said, "We've been waiting on you. Where in the world have you been?" Well, I've never had a hotel person ask me that. In all the years I've stayed in them, what I usually get is I'm dragging 200 pounds of luggage up to a registration desk. Somebody looks at me and says, "Checking in?" And I always want to say, "No, I just take my stuff with me wherever I go. I just thought I'd come by and see how y'all doing. But anyway, these people were different, and I noticed that difference immediately. The man that held the door came to me and said, "Let me get your stuff to your room." And he even said, "I don't want you to tip me. I just want to share a couple of things with you about our property." And he told me about coming down for breakfast next morning, what to order, and who to get it from, and who to talk to, and just a lot of things that I could spend a little more time telling you about, but I'm not going to do because of time. Anyway, I went out the next morning. I got what he told me, and I had a great couple of days there. I wasn't working. I was there that Sunday and Monday night. And that happened for a couple of weeks, and every time the same thing. And as they got to know me and I got to know them, I had a wonderful time staying there. After about 3 weeks, I did have one time when I had some extra time, so I went to the manager. And being in the business I'm in, I wanted to know what was going on. And when I met that particular manager, I knew instantly why the rest of the people were like that, because he was literally over the top. I don't mean in an obnoxious sort of way or an arrogant sort of way, just an extremely confident, highly energized leader who was doing things the right way. And he took me back into the bowels or the back part of where they were, where all the employees went, and you could just feel the energy back there among all of those people that even the ones who were not exposed to the public had an interaction with each other that told me that the spirit of a place, what was really there. I've known for years also that I can walk into most businesses and organizations or groups and let me spend 10 or 15 minutes with the people, and I'll tell you what the leaders are like, because I do believe that this thing is setting an example. So that's part of it. The second thing is, on this getting to know the why, I don't think anybody has a job just because they want to do that job. Let me explain that. I was watching, this will tell my age, I was watching Johnny Carson's show years ago, and they had a nuclear physicist on there who worked for NASA. And somehow the subject came up about, Johnny told him he was a rocket scientist, and they got to talking about that, and the nuclear physicist said, even rocket science isn't rocket science if you know what you're doing. And so I'm sure that somebody who's head of a lab or who's working in a lab or who has been educated to be a part of a lab would say the same thing. Most anybody in any profession. I've had a couple of surgeries in my lifetime. I hope that my surgeons felt that way. They'd done that so many times. They knew what they were, what they were doing. So I don't think any of us do it for the essence of that job itself. We do it because of what will happen as a result of what we do. My surgeon performed surgery to help me get better. That's their main concern. That you do what you do in your lab for results that a lot of times may go somewhere else to help someone else accomplish whatever it is they're doing. So what I'd want to do if I ran a lab, as I would any department or group, I'd want to sit down individually with people and say, I know that you're a respected professional. That's why we have you on board on our team here. But why are you doing this? What do you want to accomplish? What are your dreams? What's important to you? What do you see down the road for you? I'd ask a ton of questions, and I'd do it more than one time. They'd get to a point where they could count on me sitting down with them periodically and checking on them, not just the job, but outside of the job. And that goes back to that most important thing of find out what people want and why. And if you wrote that down, circle it and circle it again, why they want that, then simply show them how by doing a great job here, it'll help them get what they want later on. I have a lot of trouble with people who complain a lot. And I remember one time, guys walking down the street, the story's told he had all his problems in a sack, and they were weighing him down, and finally he threw his sack of problems down to the concrete. He said, I wish I were dead. And with that, the angel of death showed up and said, you called? He said, yeah, I'd like to know if you'd help me get this sack back up here on my shoulder. So we say we want to do something until the moment of truth comes, but these people who complain a lot and gripe about their jobs and how bad things are, again, after a while, it can wear on you and other people in that department. So I guess the one bad apple in the barrel does make some sense. So I want to stop here and see if there were other questions before I begin to wrap up my part. Is there anything else that's come in?
Yeah, We have quite a few, actually. One of them was just sort of based on what you were just mentioning. How do you maintain morale in the lab when one person's lack of motivation is wearing on everyone else?
Again, it's coaching for that one person. If you've got, as an example, 5 people in the lab and one of them's really tearing the rest of them down on a consistent basis, then that's a great coaching opportunity to try to either get them on top of their game and doing what they should do, or if it can't be done, then you have I think we have a responsibility to the other 4 on that team to do something about that. And if they, as a matter of fact, if they see that you as a leader are not doing that, they begin to assume you are rewarding non-performance. You're rewarding bad behavior. And if you continue to do that, how long is it going to be before some of them are going to start saying, well, I shouldn't work as hard. I shouldn't be as motivated because he apparently doesn't, or she doesn't care. She's not doing anything about that. She hadn't sat down with that person and coached him. Anyway, that's my quick answer for that one.
Okay. Another question is motivating the millennials, the 20-somethings, who constantly are tweeting and using Facebook during work hours, is there anything you should do differently for them?
Oh, every group is different. Every human being has obviously a lot of similarities, some of which we've talked about, but you're right. The culture that's built into the decade in which people were born has a lot to do with their performance. And we know that the work ethic of one generation may not be the same as the other. What I found, though, is that in a lot of the young people who are so involved with technology, and we have a program called Priority Management. We teach people how to be productive using Outlook and BlackBerry and iPhones and iPads. And so I know they're out there all the time, and people are constantly on those. That there just have to be some agreements. You need to get your group together and say, okay, we need to create a charter. It's a set of agreements that here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to interact with each other. Here's how we're going to interact with professional technology versus my personal technology. If I'm trying to do something in the lab over here, and at the same time I'm working on doing texting a friend on my iPhone or BlackBerry or Droid or whatever, then people want to say that's multitasking. That leads me to something else, I guess. I don't believe in multitasking. And if you want to question that, and go out on a tennis court and try to play tennis with about 3 or 4 tennis balls at one time, it just doesn't work. What ends up happening is we end up doing poorly on everything we're trying to do at the same time. But creating a charter among a group, we do that with organizations where they create, because the problem with email and all the other technology is, I don't remember the first day I went in my office years ago and said, okay, today's the day. I've never used email before in my life, but I'm starting today. It just happened. It just came upon us, and there were no guidelines and no rules. So I just say you got to set up rules for that and set up a charter just like we do with anything else.
Okay. I have another one about the boss. How would you recommend that a subordinate motivate the boss?
That's always a challenge, and I feel for a person who is highly motivated, and yet the person they're working for suppresses them or suppresses that effort, and or even if they don't do anything directly, just indirectly by their lack of motivation, creating a poor environment. How do you attack that? Well, it's difficult, and to have a personal conversation with other people, if there's, I don't know how many more in that department, excuse me, or how many are in that in that area, but to talk to them, an intervention of some sort among the people on the team, if they're willing to do that together, to sit down with that person. If it doesn't work, then who do they report to? If they own the company, you've got to make some decisions. If they're not willing to change, do I want to stay with this or do something totally different? We can't change everybody as much as we'd like to, particularly some of you control freaks out there who think you can change everybody in the world. It can't be done. And so if you're in a position where the boss isn't motivated or isn't doing the right things, then it's either confront them about that, and you're taking your chances when you do, or move on.
Okay. Another one.
Easier said than done, by the way, I realize that.
Exactly, yeah. Is there a way to motivate with fear but still maintain your respect and trust that people have for you?
Yes, if it's done periodically. If that's the modus operandi of a person, though, if it's day in and day out, after a while it's not going to work. It's going to wear. I mean, it might work, but it's wearing on people in a big way. It's kind of like it's just eroding the banks of the river, so to speak. If it's used occasionally, and I remember my office years ago, a lady who ran my office about 18 years, passed away now, said she told somebody one time, I overheard her, said he rarely gets angry. He's talking about me. He rarely gets that way. But if he ever does, it's not a pretty sight. And I've tried as a leader to control my emotions and my anger to that extent. But sometimes it's a last resort. Other times, too, when you've got two people who are not getting along or who aren't cooperating on a team and staff, sometimes they'll come to you and one of them will or the other one and want you to fix that. And I encourage leaders not to get involved with that. I tell them it's like theater. In any play or movie, or always three parts: the victim, the hero, and then the perpetrator. So, two people come to me, want me to fix their problem, then I'm going to be one of those. I'm either going to be the good guy or the bad guy to both of them. So anyway, I don't want to get bogged down in this answer. I'll keep looking at my watch and realize the time here. So.
Okay, we have one more for you.
Right.
What is the direction to take if the person doesn't know what he or she wants or doesn't answer as to why they want a particular goal or what they're striving for?
Well, that gets into a lot of emotional. If I've got somebody working with me who does not want to talk about what's important to them in life, then maybe it's because I haven't shared mine with them. That's always a great place to start. Here's why I'm here. Here's why I'm doing what I'm doing. Here's what my expectations are that in life. Here are my priorities. It goes back to personally. I love to get in I'm meeting with a group tomorrow, and we're going to talk about not only their company's mission and vision and stuff, but we're going to talk about their individual values. It's a team that's become a little dysfunctional, and my job in the morning is going to be to work with them, or tomorrow all day really, is to help them discover each other's strengths. We have an exercise called Strength Bombardment I'll be doing with helping them do that, where I take them through some parts of their life. But I've got to be willing to share mine too, my story, and what I value. Here are my values. I'm coaching a couple of people on trying to help them figure out their path and what's important to them. And I have them write down things. I just had one sent to me yesterday, the person I'm working with here, on their values. And I'll be meeting with them this coming Monday morning to go over that and talk about their next step. So some people, it's difficult to pull that out of somebody. If the trust is there, though, as we said earlier, credibility, intimacy, however we know each other, do what we always say we're going to do, then the risk will begin to diminish for them, and they may eventually open up. I think to walk into somebody cold and say, "Why are you here?" that doesn't work. It takes time. Does that answer it?
I think so, yeah, definitely.
Okay.
And you said you had a few more remarks to share with us?
Yeah, I got a couple of things that I think are in my closing thoughts on this whole thing about motivation. It's not an easy topic. As a matter of fact, when I'm flying and people ask me what I do for a living, I tell them I started a training business a long time ago, and I'm a speaker. I say, well, what kind of speaker? Well, the one I love is, what do you speak about? And I usually say, about 45 minutes. And all the speakers love that question. But I'm always even somewhat reluctant to say I'm a motivational speaker, or what I'll usually say is I'm a motivational humorist, and which I tend to be. And people ask me, why do you say that? And I say, well, it's because if you don't laugh, I'm just a motivational speaker. But so I kind of make light of the word and of the topic, but it's serious business. And not only do we see it in our workplace, but we see it in our homes. We see it with relationships outside of work and home and churches, synagogues, mosques, whatever we're involved in, and in communities and with friends, and it's bigger than most people want to give it credit, maybe for being. Of course, I'm pleased with the number of people who have, a large number who have shown up today for this, and I certainly hope, with all I've got in me, that I've shed a little bit more light on this for you. But I believe that as a leader, particularly of a lab, there's a lot of responsibility. That's a big part of our job description, and that goes back to one of the slides. I'm not going to zip back through the slides here trying to figure out which one it is, but to go back to having clear expectations of people in a work group, to know what the goal of that job is and what their personal vision is at the time with the company. I believe a lot of the stress that we have in life comes from when our activities are not aligned with our values and beliefs. And the broader that gap, the greater the stress. So we've got to get activities lined up behind what we stand for and believe in. And the clearer we can do all of that, and I think the better off we're going to be. I said earlier also there are 3 areas I was concerned with. One is hiring the right kind of people. That's a big step in the right direction to creating the kind of environment we want. Because we know, again, we can't motivate, we can create an environment. The second thing is how do we help people who have kind of lost their motivation to get remotivated. And so those 4 things can do it that I mentioned earlier. And then the last thought I wanted to reemphasize this thing about people who you have to keep trying to save, trying to salvage, trying to motivate, trying to get them to do what needs to be done. That you've got to set some rules, I guess, or guidelines for yourself that, okay, I've done everything I know to do, and I'm going to do this much more. Because I think that most people, when they prolong that letting somebody go who's just not a part of the team, is because they don't want to have any regret. They don't want to feel like that they didn't do all they could do. And I found that usually that's not the problem. They usually have done more than probably was expected of them trying to save or salvage someone. And so that's just, that's it. I've got I was going to mention latest book. I've got a couple of them out. One of them's called Thinking Big and Living Large, which has a lot of my humor. But this is the latest one out called The Sheep Thief, and it's allegorical. It's a legend in there that starts the book that had a big impact on my life about 25 years ago. And then there's a story about a couple people who are in leadership positions, and one of them gets promoted over another one, and what happens. And we've just sent 170 of those to Australia, and the book's doing extremely well. We're real pleased with it, and just the feedback I've been getting has really means a lot to me. I wish I could be with everybody individually, but I found this is one of the best ways to get the message out, so to speak, to get the word out. And if anybody who's listening wants to get one of those, you can go to a bookstore, go to Amazon, anywhere you want. If you want to email me or contact my office, my website's alwalker.com. My email directly is al@alwalker.com, and at $14.95 retail. I tell people when I'm speaking live that book sells for $14.95. We don't have any nickels, so it's $15 a piece. But anyway, I'll do it for $10. If anybody wants to buy one, they can have that book for $10. Plus, it's a couple of dollars to get it mailed to you, so we'll have to add that to it. We do, credit cards and that sort of stuff like anybody else does. But I don't mean to. I'm not good at hawking this stuff, but I just want to make everybody aware of that. And then that last slide, I wanted to make sure we got up before our time was up. Okay, so there it is.
Perfect. Thanks so much for your insights, Al. I know everyone appreciated it. We were inundated, as usual, with questions. And like I said, Al had agreed to get back to you via email. So watch for your inbox and watch for me.
I will.
An email from him.
Please do it.
We hope you enjoyed this presentation, another installment of Lab Manager Academy. I would like to thank our sponsor, Unity Lab Services, part of Thermo Fisher Scientific, without whom this webinar series would not be possible. Join us next month when we will meet again on the first Wednesday, that's May 2nd, at 1 p.m., when professional speaker and author Sue Hershkowitz-Core presents Digital Manners, Email Etiquette to get the best results in your lab. Watch your email for more details, and we'll see you then. Thank you.